When you're building your marketplace and you have your chicken and egg problem, the easiest place to start is with supply, because the sellers on the platform are financially motivated to be on the platform. And I would go to them and set low expectations, saying, hey, we're launching this. We're free to launch at the beginning, or we take just a rake. Be in there. But here's the key, and here's the pro tip. It's easy to have infinite supply. But if you drown your marketplace in infinite supply and you don't have demand for it, they're all going to churn. They're not going to be engaged. So when you launch, you curate the very best supply for it in one vertical, in one category, maybe even in one geography, like in one zip code. And then you find demand for that.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Mark Peter Davis, managing partner of Interplay. On this podcast, I interview innovators about their strategies, industries, and decisions. This week, I chat with Fabrice Grinda, founding partner of FJ Labs. FJ Labs is a VC that specializes in marketplaces and invests pretty much in every geography and stage of the venture category. As Fabrice puts it, they do angel investing at venture scale. And I think what he means by that is not only do they not lead rounds, which is more typical to an angel, but they do a massive number of investments every year. Last year, they did almost 200 new investments. Now, Fabrice is super interesting beyond VC. He's been a serial entrepreneur for a couple of decades now and has really interesting views and perspectives on wealth and social impact. He started what was essentially the eBay for Europe, and then OLX, which is essentially the Craigslist for the rest of the world. He shares some incredibly useful tips for entrepreneurs, especially for entrepreneurs focused on marketplaces. And we talk about his approach to venture capital, how FJ Labs operates, how he makes decisions, and much more. Enjoy. This episode is brought to you by Chelsea Capital. Chelsea Capital provides high-quality, low-cost accounting, tax, CFO, and alternative finance solutions. For those who don't know, alternative finance solutions include venture debt and other forms of non-dilutive capital. They help companies scale their operations while keeping costs low. If you're interested in learning more, visit chelsea.capital. Fabrice, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I've been very excited to have you on. I think you've got a lot of wisdom, and you do something that most people don't do, in that you practice radical candor. It feels like in everything, every time I've ever talked to you. So I think we're going to get into some really interesting topics today, and I have a feeling you're going to share more than people are normally comfortable with, which I think is very powerful. You're going to help a lot of people. Let's start, though. Let's level set this. Can you give an overview of FJ Labs? I think people need to know what you're doing for your day job before we kind of extend beyond that.
Sure. So my current day job is to be the founding partner at FJ Labs, which is kind of a venture fund. It's kind of an accidental venture fund. It really came out of my angel investing activities while I was an entrepreneur. So for the last 24 years, I've been building companies, I've been running companies, and other founders kept approaching me for me to invest in them. And for the longest time, I thought, should I be doing this, right? Is it a distraction from my core mandate as a founder to be investing in other startups? And I'm like, if I can articulate lessons learned to others, it probably means I've internalized them. And so it's okay. And meeting all these amazing founders beyond helping them realize their dreams is also an amazing way to keep my fingers on the pulse of the market. So by 2013, when I sold my last company, which by the way was like ginormous, and I don't know if you want to cover that.
Yeah. Well, tell everyone what the last company was real quick.
Yeah. So the last company was a company called OLX. It's today the biggest classified site in the world. It's 11,000 employees in 30 countries. It's the leading classified site in Brazil and all of LATAM, in Russia, Ukraine, and all of Eastern Europe, in India, Pakistan, of all the Southeast Asia, and the UAE and all the Middle East. And it's basically what Craigslist would be or should be if it was run, by someone like me, meaning modern UX UI, integrated payments and shipping and escrow, with
multilingual and all the
exactly, and no spam, no scam, no murders, etc. And actually targeting primarily women in a female-friendly space, given that women are the primary decision makers in all household purchases. That company is like over 300 million new users a month. It's absolutely ginormous. And after I sold that, I already had 150 investments, doing really well, already pulled them with my current partner. And I was like, I like building companies, like investing in companies. Let's create a structure that allows me to do that. And I never really set out to build a venture fund. And I think by virtue of being visible, I started being approached by potential investors who said, hey, we would like exposure to what you guys are doing. Do you mind if we co-invest with you? And so kind of 2016, we took our first investor or LP for 50 million, one LP outside of our own capital. We deployed that. Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, basically, they're people that had. It's a company called Telenor. They were a big telco in Norway, and they had backed my biggest competitor when I was running OLX. And ultimately, we fought a big war, and we merged 51 for us, 49 for them. And by then, all of this had like unwound. They'd made like $1 billion, and they ended up owning a whole bunch of classified assets around the world. And they were like, "Hey, we love you, and you've also made us lots of money. We'd like to understand what's going on in marketplaces in the U.S. to either bring it to our markets or defend against disruption." And so it was really kind of both strategic for them and financial. In 2018, we raised fund 2, and they're like, hey, if you want to bring other people on board, why not? And other people started approaching us. So we started getting like a lot of family offices that were being disrupted by tech, and a lot of other strategics who were interested in investing in the category. And so we finished deploying that. That was 225 million. Finished deploying that in July of 2021, and then we closed Fund 3, which would be like 300-400 million, with kind of like either amazing founders that I've worked with forever, like Reid Hoffman or whatever, Kevin Ryan, or the founder of like Wayfair, or these family offices were actually strategics interested in either buying or investing later stages in the companies we invest in. So I guess what that was a long-winded way to answer your question. So my day job is running FJ Labs. FJ Labs is a venture fund specializing in marketplaces. We invest in every geography and every category at every stage. But the focus is we really do angel investing at venture scale. We don't lead, we don't price, we don't take board seats. We decide after 2 one-hour meetings whether we invest or not with full transparency. We tell you why we're investing, why we're not investing, what we need to change for us to change our mind. And we try to be as founder-friendly as possible. So we're not setting the terms. We decide very quickly. And we're super prolific. I mean, to give you a sense of scale, to date, we've invested in over 850 startups. Last year, we invested in 281 startups, 180 new investments, 101 follow-ups. And
that's a lot for a venture firm.
And it's been going really well. I mean, we've had 265 exits and so far, and a 45% realized IR. So things are going well. That's
great. Okay, so what's the typical investment profile? Because when you say angel investing at a venture scale, I get the angel investing part, that the process is less rigorous. It's you're looking at kind of more strategic elements rather than doing your own diligence. I get that. Nothing wrong with it. The question is, when you say at a venture scale, is that the reflection of the volume, the amount of capital you're managing, the volume? What is it? The check size?
Yeah, the angel investing in venture scale is really because of the overall capital deployment. We're deploying 100 million a year, 150 million a year potentially, but this fund, which is way more than typical angels deploy. Now, the reason it's still angel investing is we're writing small checks relative to the lead. We don't want to compete with the top VCs in the world for allocation. We want to be their friends. In fact, most of the deals come from friendly VCs or sharing deals with us. In return, of course, we send them all of our deals. And so our pre-seed check size is going to be like 200K, or C check size like 300K, or A check size is 325, or B onwards is 725. So it's fixed check sizes, though we'll take less if less is available. And they're always small relative to the lead. And that's why it's kind of angel investing in venture scale. But I'm more than happy to talk to you and walk you through the process of how we decide whether we invest or not.
Well, if you've teed it up, let's do it. Tell me about the process.
Yeah, so actually, before I get to the process, I'll walk you through the flow. These days, every week, we get about 200 inbound deals, and often many more than that. And they come from 3 sources. A third comes from the friendly VCs, and every 8 to 12 weeks, we sit down the top 100 VCs in the world, covering every stage, every category, every geography, and we share deal flow. And it goes from everyone, the amplifiers or whatever, first minute of the pre-seed stage, with the General Catalyst, Bessemer, Sequoia, First Walk in the middle, all the way to whatever the Tigers at the later stages, where we bring them all of our best deals. And in return, they invite us some of the deals where we have expertise, so mostly marketplaces. About a third of the deal comes from fellow founders. So at this point, we've backed almost 2,000 founders in the 835 companies. And they come back for their next company. They send us their friends. They send us their employees who are becoming founders. And about a third of the deals come in cold. And actually, we review even the cold inbound deals. And about 16% of the investments we've made have come from cold. And some of the very best investments come from cold. So we get these deals. They're assigned randomly to one of the team members, unless someone says they want it. We're 4 partners, 3 associates, and 1 analyst. And we review the deal. We decide, is it appropriate for us or not? And usually about 3/4 of them are not. They're amazing, but they're not for us. They're like biotech, hardware, space tech, and we don't feel that we have appropriate expertise. So we review, and the other 50, we take a 1-hour call. And that 1-hour call, we try to assess 4 things, and that's actually the evaluation criteria. Do we like the team? Do we like the business? Do we like the deal terms? And does it meet our thesis of where the world is heading? Now, let me double click on all 4 of these, because do we like the team? I mean, every VC in the world will tell you, I only invest in extraordinary people. The thing is, that's extraordinarily subjective. What is an amazing team? And we've actually looked and thought through what it meant for founders to be very successful. And for us, it's someone who is both a visionary and an execution machine. And that means someone who is extremely eloquent and has extraordinary communication skills. But that's not enough, because if you only have that, maybe you build a very large company, but one that's not profitable or doesn't scale, etc. But that said, it is necessary. It's a necessary but insufficient condition, because if you're an amazing orator or public speaker, you're going to attract better teams, you're going to raise more money, you're going to get better PR, you're going to get better BD deals. But you also need to be able to execute. And we look at that. The way we evaluate it over the course of a 1-hour call is how well you understand the business you're in, how well you understand the unit economics. And we want you to be able to articulate, even pre-launch, we want you to have done the landing page analysis and done a customer acquisition cost analysis and compare that to look at what the average order value in the industry is, see what the net margin structure you're expecting is, and you should be able to articulate that intelligently. And the Venn diagram of people that are amazing storytellers and people that are amazing at execution is actually, the intersection is very small, and we want people that are both. Number 2, we want businesses that are compelling, and so for some VCs, by the way, number 1 is enough. And if you're pre-seed, pre-launch, obviously, this is the most relevant metric. But once you're post-launch, actually, we do care about the other 3. Number 2 is, do we like the business? Which means for us, is the category large enough, or can it be large enough through your execution? And are the unit economics compelling? And we are extraordinarily unit economic driven. In marketplaces, and obviously this is a little bit different if you're in e-commerce, it's a little bit different if you're in SaaS, but we try to invest in businesses where you recoup your fully loaded customer acquisition costs on a net contribution margin basis after 6 months, and you 3x your CAC after 18 months. Now, and ideally, we don't know what the LTV to CAC is, because you have negative churn, in which case, who knows, it's 10-1, 20-1, etc. And if your unit economics are underwater, which can happen, we want you to be able to articulate why, with scale, they will automatically fix themselves. Maybe you're in a food delivery business, and right now you're doing 1 delivery per hour. You're paying $15 an hour, your delivery guy. Your unit economics are underwater, but the minute he does 3 deliveries an hour, it's $5 a delivery, and it works. Something like that. Like, it should not require every star in the multiverse to align for your unit economics to work. And we really care about that, because otherwise you may build a very large business that doesn't make any money, which in the long run doesn't really work out. Number 3, what are the deal terms? And we are, nothing's cheap in tech, but we want something that's fair in light of the size of the opportunity, the quality of the team, the traction that you have.
What is fair? How do you think about that?
So valuations went up, especially in the late stage last year, and something I covered in one of my macro articles. But the median pre-seed, the median valuations didn't move up nearly as much as you might think, and crypto falls a little bit outside that realm. But the median pre-seed for us until 2020 was like 3 to 5 pre, raising 1. And last year went up to 6, 7, but not that much more. And so if you're pre-seed raising at 30, more likely than not, we're not going to do it. The median seed used to be like rate 3 raising at 8 and 9 pre, and last year it went up to 12. And that's still reasonable for us. And the median A, used to be you're raising 7 at 22, and now you're raising 10 at 30. And those are fair by our standard with relevant traction. So at your seed round, we're expecting you to have like whatever 150K in GMV per month with a 10-15% take rate. At the A round, you're doing 500K in GMV, and the B round, you're doing 2 million in GMV per month, more or less, right? It depends on the take rate you have, et cetera. Now, there are exceptions, right? Like the rounds you've been reading about in the press are like, oh, they raise a $50 million Series A at 250 pre.
Totally.
And these
There's
move
crazy
the
stuff
mean.
happening.
But yeah, we wouldn't do those deals. They're amazing for the founders and the companies, though actually I can make an argument. Many of the companies that dies because the founders raise too much money at too high a price, they don't grow into that valuation, and that kills the companies because of like anti-dilution provisions. No one wants to do down rounds. I mean, it's probably one of the top reasons companies die is founders raising too much money at too high a price. So we don't do these deals. So the mean, by the way, is way higher. The mean pre-seed, seed, A and B is way higher than numbers I gave, but the median actually is not. And we're so prolific, we have a good sense of where the market is. And so we stick to our heuristics. With the exception that if you're a returning founder for us that has done well before, we will back you no matter what. No matter what you build, no matter the raise, et cetera. You don't even need to take a call. We'll just send you the check. And so we have done a few crazy deals, but that's the reason. And also, many of those deals are out of scope for us. Like we had the founders of Vettery, which is a labor marketplace, then decided to go, and we sold a Deco for 100 million, made whatever 8.5 extra money, everything was great. And then they went on to build Archer, which is an electric flying taxi company. And they're like, we're pre-seed, 80 pre or whatever, 100 pre, and we're like, okay, here's the check.
What percentage of your portfolio is the re-upping founders, your alums?
And ever increasing because we have 2,000 founders we backed.
There you go.
Put it differently, 30% of the portfolio is non-marketplace, and many of those are the re-upping founders, which is a good sign that they're coming back and they want to work with us. But we also do like tools around marketplaces, et cetera, and we're doing a lot of stuff that's like interest things that interest us, which actually leads me to selection criteria number 4. Is your idea in line with our thesis of where the world is heading? And we are extraordinarily thesis driven. We have a clear thesis on the future of finance, the future of food, the future of real estate, the future of automotive, the future, and even within marketplaces, we have 3 core theses in marketplaces that we look for, and we want ideas that are in line with that. And in a way, we're also mission driven, right? The reason I'm a VC, the reason I'm an investor is the world is facing a number of fundamental problems. We're facing a climate crisis. We have a social inequality and inequality of opportunity, or social injustice. We have a mental and physical well-being crisis. And I do not think that the political system is going to address any of these. And so it's up to us as founders to be solutionists, to use technology to find solutions to the world's problems. And so it is mission driven from that perspective. I want to try to invest in companies, founders that are trying to address these fundamental problems. And by the way, the bigger the problem, the bigger the economic opportunity. And it fits better in a for-profit model because this actually ends up being more scalable and more effective. And so, here you have it. If we love the team, we'd love the business, we love the deal terms, and we think that the idea is in line with our thesis, we invest, and we can decide that in 1 hour. That's great.
What are the reasons why a founder should choose to work with you guys? This is my underhand pitch. Take a swing.
We're former founders, so we actually know what it's like to operate a business, and we can talk extremely intelligently about like the complexities of operating in a business. We've probably seen more marketplaces than anyone else out there, in addition to the fact that I've run marketplaces for most of my life. And so when it comes to everything from like building liquidity. Do you start with the supply or the demand? Should you go hyper local or national or international? Should your rake be 5% or 1% or 20%? How do you measure elasticity of supply and demand? We're probably more well versed than any other investors out there in this category in terms of being able to help you. And last but not least, we're in because we don't lead and we don't price, and we have these amazing connections with all the other VCs. We will get you funded. Like, our superpower is we will get, if you need help raising or filling this round, we will do that for you. And more importantly, most people do not need help raising the round they're typically talking to us about. But when they go to the A, when they go to the B, and they go to the C, we will intro them to whomever, like Firstmark, Greylock, Andreessen, whomever is right for them, we will make the intros. And it is extraordinarily valuable for them because it de-risks the fundraising. It makes it a lot simpler. We will give them feedback on the deck, on the pitch, on the process. And it's also super efficient because you're like, we have 850 companies in the portfolio, and yet we're often the most value-added investor these founders have because we really focus on when to help them. We'll help them right before they go fundraising the next round, and that's the most valuable for them.
Okay, so there is an implicit piece of this that I think is the most interesting. It's the sheer volume of your portfolio, right? There are a couple of firms out there that have huge volumes. Techstars, my buddy over at David Cohen over at Techstars has a huge volume. He's got a very different model than you. You have a huge volume. It's not as common. Most firms are going out there and targeting 25 deals in a portfolio, something thereabout. What is your thinking around the optimal volume in a portfolio and why?
So first of all, this is a reflection of my personality, and not there's no intelligent portfolio construction. So I actually have done the research on what is the ideal portfolio construction, but the portfolio of FJ Labs is completely built bottoms up. We meet people. If we like them, we invest. If we don't like them, we don't invest. And at the end of the year, the chips fall where they may. And it just so happens, of course, there's more C deals than A deals, more A deals than B deals, more B deals than C deals. There's more US deals than European deals, and there are more European deals than India and Brazil deals. And so if you look at our portfolio from a number of deals perspective, we're mostly seed and A, then a few Bs and very few Cs, and not too many pre-seed either. And then we're 55% US, Canada, we're 25% Europe, we're 10% Brazil, India, and we're like the rest of the world, and really all over the world. But it's not by design. Now, in terms of number of deals, to answer your question specifically, because I diverged on portfolio construction, I'd actually like. I think there are many problems to solve in the world, and I like finding ways to address many of these. Because we choose not to compete with the major VCs, we could actually not run a concentrated portfolio. So first of all, by design, if I wanted to invest in 30 companies, I would need to be a lead, and I would need to write like $5, $10, $15 million checks.
Right.
But then the entire strategy of working with the other VCs and being their friend and not their competitor kind of becomes invalidated. But more importantly, as a reflection of my personal philosophy, I just like meeting lots of interesting people and being exposed to all these different areas, and I get like now I have a great sense of like what's happening in like everything from climate to automotive, to real estate, and I think it's fascinating. There are also the corollaries between these different industries, which are the marketplace dynamics are so much closer than people suspect. I find that fascinating, and so it's more a reflection of my personality. But that said, there is data on what is the correct portfolio size. AngelList did an analysis of what your return profile looks like based on the number of deals you have, and basically, because venture follows a power law where the best deals do most of the returns, you need to be in those best deals. And the best way to be in those best deals is essentially to be in every deal. And so the AngelList study, which actually is published and peer reviewed and all that, is the more diverse your side of your portfolio, the higher your IRR and your returns, that you should invest in all qualified, and they have a definition of what qualified means, deals possible. Now, the reason most VCs are not built that way, by the way, is actually driven by the LPs. So LPs hate that diversification. right? Because they see their jobs as themselves picking the VCs that are more specialized. So the LPs are like, oh, I'm going to have this fund. It's going to be my Series A B2B SaaS company. I'm going to have this fund. They're going to be my Series B, D2C e-commerce in Europe, whatever. And they do their like little funds of fund strategy. And a fund that does all that for them, they really don't like, because in a way it's like the job they should be doing. And so LPs are not super keen on that diversified strategy. And so it wouldn't work for most, but it really works. And the benefit is over longer periods of time, we're always going to be in the top decile performance. Now, in any one fund life, by the way, we're never going to be top decile, because if you imagine a fund is hyper concentrated, they do 10 investments, one of those is 100x, they're going to be a 10x fund, and they're going to be top decile, but they're going to have massive variability. Next fund, their 10 may not hit, and they may not return money. And by the way, most VC funds actually don't return cash on cash money beyond the S&P. The top quartile does, and the top quartile is actually highly correlated over fund life, but most do not. In our case, if you include all of my history as an angel investor and but not as a founder, right? I'm not including the equity I got in the companies I founded. On the 270 exits we've had a 45% realized IRR over 24 years. That's probably, I don't know where that ranks. It has to be in the top 10%, maybe in the top 1% over that time period.
Given that you're diversifying so much, is the core value add more sourcing, or is it more deal selection? Right? Because one of the things, theoretically, arguably the best portfolio is one investment, all the money in the world, and the best company, the best return.
Yes.
That's it. Right? But what the presumption there is that someone could be a good enough deal picker and get access to it. Right? The core issue for a lot of VCs is they're not great deal pickers. So how do you think about this? Is that the message to LPs, like, hey, look, we're good deal pickers, but we really don't have to be because we play the game so broadly? Is that part of the narrative for you?
Not really. So I actually would argue we're very good deal pickers.
Yeah.
But often we will not be in the top 0.1% of deals, by the way, because we're so sensitive on price and we're so sensitive on unit economics. Like we would have passed on Facebook, we would have passed on Google, because neither of them had business models when they launched, nor could they articulate what those models were. But we have a lot of singles and doubles and triples. So even though our portfolio is so broad, we've actually made money on over 50% of our exits, which for a mostly seed fund is extraordinary. Last year we had 41 exits. We made money in 24. We lost money in 17. And obviously you make a lot more on the 24 than you lose on the 17. So I think we're very good pickers, number one. But two, obviously our deal flow is amazing because we've built a brand as these founder-friendly guys who decide after 1 hour if you invest or not, who are super helpful. And if you're doing anything marketplace related, by the way, marketplace, let me define it pretty widely, is you're building something that's an intermediary between a seller of something and a buyer of something. And that thing could be anything. I mean, so to me, most of fintech is a marketplace. Because, think of Klarna. It's an intermediary between providers of capital, typically the banks that give you the lines of credit, and consumers that are borrowing. And many people wouldn't think of it that way, but to me, those dynamics is, if you're matching sellers and buyers, regardless of the category, it falls in the marketplace definition for us, which is obviously why we can invest in like 300 marketplaces in a year.
Okay, so there's a little bit of learning here. I mean, I think you're a bit of a pioneer in this type of volume for something outside of an accelerator incubator model.
Yeah.
So where has this model gone wrong that you've had to correct? What did you learn along the way that's kind of nuanced to not being a VC and not being an investor, but being a high volume VC or high volume investor?
The way, look, I don't know if it's gone wrong in the sense that we can typically. So first of all, I don't think it's necessarily easily replicable by most, because we are in an extraordinarily privileged position to answer also part of like the previous question, where the deals come to us, right? Like most associates and analysts at most VC firms spend their time like networking and finding deals. In our case, we're like drinking at the fire hose of incoming deals, and we're reviewing the incoming deals. And we would like to do more outbound. It's just we're too busy reviewing the inbound, and we have like the 200 inbound
there's
every
no
week.
need. There's no need.
Yeah, but we do miss deals as a result of that. So we are trying to change that to some extent, even though. So first of all, there's the part of the reason I can share my entire strategy online, including everything, the deal memos, the philosophy, etc., is even if you had all of it in your mind encoded, even though it's probably hard to do without the 24 years of like at bats of like seeing 5,000 companies a year. Without a deal flow, it's not really replicable. Now, where it's gone wrong, sorry.
I was going to say FJ Labs is a marketplace.
Yes, we are. Or a marketplace, absolutely. We're matching founders with money, from our LPs, and by the way, our LPs, I'm the largest LP in the fund, right? Like of the 450 million we've deployed to date, over 100 million of that is my own money. Might be 150. I actually haven't tracked. Don't look at it too closely, because this started as frankly personal investments for my partner Jose and myself. It again, the accidental VC thing. One more thing, and I know I didn't answer the question. One more thing we do very differently, by the way, is the follow-ons. We don't reserve capital for follow-ons, so we'll invest out of whatever fund is currently active, the follow-ons. So we tell our, because we don't always follow on, we'll evaluate follow-ons as though they were new investments. Knowing what we know now of the company, of the team, of the terms, would we invest? And often the answer is we love the team, we love the company, but the valuation is insane, so we're not taking our pro ratas. And so we've been following on maybe 33% of the deals, but as a result, it doesn't make sense to reserve capital follow-ons in a fund. So we do it in other funds, which leads me to the issues in a way we face, right? Like the problems we face is we have had a really hard time, much harder than I would have expected, raising capital other than capital that came to us automatically, right? So we've had these LPs that are like friends. They're like, here's a check.
Right. They know you and they know your success. Those folks.
Exactly. Or strategics that we've worked with from across many years who want exposure to what we do, or family offices. And so there the capitals come. But like pitching institutional investors has been really, so far we don't have a single institutional investor, put it differently. They don't love anything about what I just described. The hyper diversification, because they feel that in a way it's their job to find different funds that cover different areas. And hyper diversification number of deals. They don't like that we're multi-stage. They don't like that we're multi-geography. They don't like that the follow-on strategy is in whatever fund is currently active, and which versus having capital reserve follow-ons in the original funds, and so all of that, and so it's taken way more time to raise capital than I would have liked, and also as a result, we're probably a much smaller fund that we should be. So right now, we've closed the first 210 million of the new fund. The new fund, it's like 300 to 500 million. 500 million is a hard cap. I would like to hit it, but it'll be at least 300 million. And it's been 7 months. It's mostly the existing investors re-upping. There are new investors, like founders that we've backed that have exited that are investing in it, et cetera. But again, we don't have a single institutional investor in the fund because of all the reasons and I'd like to change that, because the reality is we could be $1 billion fund with no problem, despite the not leading, not pricing strategy given the volume we have. If I do intelligent portfolio construction, like what is the maximum size I can deploy at pre-seed without leading? Like 225K. What's the maximum check size I can deploy at seed without leading? It's like 450. At A, I could probably write $1 million. At B, I could probably write 2 million. And at C, I could probably write like, 5 million and up to 10 million in like the pre-IPO rounds. And so if you look at all the deals last year, all the allocations we had, we could have deployed 350 million. And yet we didn't have that level of capital. And so we only deployed 100 million. So what we've done to not run out of money after a year, because our LP base is not such that I can actually say, oh, instead of 3 years, it's just 1 year, and now we are re-upping. They don't want that.
Right.
And nor could I, because I'm kind of the biggest LP. So it's kind of also driven by my personal cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we did instead is we decrease our check sizes to not run out of capital. So currently, as I said, our A check size is 325K. It could be $1 million. Our B check size is 725. It could be 2. And frankly, our D check size is 725K and could be 10.
Right.
And so that's been an issue. I'm trying to address it. We'll see if we were successful in the future. Now, in terms of underlying performance and access to deals, et cetera, I think hasn't been too much of an issue. I guess the other issue, it's something we've learned, is we've had to build a very big ops team. I mean, the team, we're 31, which is a lot of people.
What are most people doing? Because it sounds like 10 or so of those are investment professionals. What are the other 20 folks doing?
Yeah. So 4 partners, 3 associates, 1 analyst, so 8 investment professionals. We have 2 EIRs. But then we have a big back office team, right? Like the head of operations, the CFO, the lawyer, all the accountants and the that are in the back office team, and then we have like all the support team for them. So we probably have like 8 virtual
piles of paperwork.
Founders.
When you say 200 deals a year, you mean 200 piles of paperwork.
Yeah,
right. It's a lot to do.
A lot to do. I mean, everything, stock purchase agreements, follow-ons, legal approvals, exit, like there's infinite back office work to do. And actually one more thing we haven't done is we're currently not doing GAAP accounting, because like how do you do GAAP accounting on 800 startups? And we want to be the founder friendly guys, like, and so doing an evaluation of each company in the portfolio when they're like seed is a massive exercise that most firms, which is another reason we haven't been able to raise institutional money. And maybe we need to like bite the bullet and do it. In fact, we're currently talking to like Mike Siebel and YC and people like that. Like how do you guys do it?
Right.
And we probably need to buy that bullet at some point. But yeah, it's a lot of the issues that like you don't think about when we're a lower volume firm.
Okay, now you guys are the marketplace experts. I think that's very clear. What are 3, rules of thumb that marketplace entrepreneurs listening to this need to know? The things that are like, hey, these are the baseline pro tips.
Sure. When you're building your marketplace and you have your chicken and egg problem, the easiest place to start is with supply, because the sellers on the platform are financially motivated to be on the platform. And I would go to them and set low expectations, saying, hey, we're launching this. We're free to launch at the beginning, or we take just a rake, be in there. But here's the key, and here's the pro tip. It's easy to have infinite supply. But if you drown your marketplace in infinite supply and you don't have demand for it, they're all going to churn and they're not going to be engaged. So when you launch, you curate the very best supply for it in one vertical, in one category, maybe even in one geography, like in one zip code. And then you find demand for that. And so first of all, they're the very best. So you make sure they're engaged. You make sure they understand what the product is. You understand what their needs are. Then you find demand for them, whatever way it is. It could be sales driven. It could be marketing. It could be Google. It could be Facebook. And by the way, I actually like paid marketing to work, because that means it's scalable kind of infinitely. You find demand, and what you want to get to for that supply, and again, very limited supply, highly curated, you want to represent, if it's an item for sale, you want the probability of the item for sale to be about 20-25%. That's when you have pretty good liquidity. If it's a services business, you want to kind of represent at least 20% of the revenues of that provider. And then once you have that at that scale, then you scale the supply up one more, like whether it's in the same zip code or adjacent category, and then you match. So you start with supply, you bring demand, and then you scale both always in parallel. A problem is it's so easy to get supply that I could launch a locksmith marketplace and put every locksmith in New York on it, but then you have no demand for it, and so the supply is going to churn. There's going to be no engagement. The user experience will be awful, et cetera. So doing that is very key. So that's I guess something to keep in mind, or like magic trick number 1. Magic trick number 2 is, as you start thinking through, how do I monetize? How much do I charge? Who do I charge? And what is the correct percentages? Because you see marketplaces like stock photography marketplaces that take 75%. And then you have like some B2B marketplaces where it's essentially 0% rake or 0.1% because of extreme price sensitivity. And so the correct way to assess that is you look at the elasticity of supply and the elasticity of demand, and you take your rake on the more inelastic part of the curve. And the more inelastic it is, the higher the rake is. Now, it turns out that in most cases, you can take 10 to 20% from the supply side, but it's not a hard and set rule. It really depends on how fragmented your supply and demand is. And by the way, the more fragmented it is, the better it is for you as the marketplace, right? Like if you're in a market where there's like 3 or 4 suppliers and 3 or 4 consumers, you're probably not a marketplace. You're probably a distributor, and your ability to price and take margin is going to be very limited. And that's why I'd be very careful of playing in like highly concentrated industries, right? Like it happened to me, and not really a marketplace, but I ran a company that was selling ringtones to the mobile operators, and in the early days it was okay, but like between 2001 when I launched in 2005, and I sold in 2004, but 2005 when I left, all the operators consolidated, merged with each other, like Singular with AT&T, Verizon with like don't remember whom, but like and all of a sudden we went from like 50 customers to like 4, and on the music company, or 5, and on the music company side, they all merged with each other, like BMG and whatever, and EMI and whomever, and they also went from like many to 3 or 4, and so all of a sudden there were 4 and 5, and it wasn't an issue until we had 50 million in annual revenues. But the minute we hit 50 million in annual revenues, we started being seen by the VP level at these companies, and they started seeing us in their P&L, and they started squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. So in 2004, with my company, we did 50 million in revenues and 4 million in profits. In 2005, we did 200 million in revenues and 7 million in profits, because they basically divided our margin by 3. And so that's not a marketplace. You're a distributor, you're a facilitator, but it's not a proper marketplace.
Okay, so now you guys do more than invest at FJ Labs, and I know this is evolving a little bit. You guys have been a studio, right? You've been building companies. You want to talk about what you guys do and the method for it?
Sure. The reason we were a studio is really, same thing. It's like, what do I like to do? I like to build companies. I like to invest in companies.
I love that.
And so every year I'd be coming up with ideas and like try to build them, either personally and like go run them, which I did for a few of them, or with entrepreneurs and residences. And we created, kind of through happenstance, a program that ended up being successful. So what happened is, I don't even remember the year, maybe 2010 or 2011. This young founder reached out to me, and he's like, "Hey, I'm McKinsey, Harvard Business School. I'm at AWS right now, but I've like raised 500K. I'm trying to build this company." And he kept harassing me. Like, the thing is, I was super busy running OLX, right? Like, so that 10,000 employees in 30 countries, and I was getting emails like that, like dozens every week. So I ignored him. And one day he's like, "Hey, I'm at the door of your office. Can we meet?" I'm like, "Okay, maybe I'll meet him, and he'll let me be." And he was building like some sort of chat roulette for a competitor. And I'm like, terrible idea. It won't work. Return the money to investors, call it a day. And calls me back the next day. He's like, "Oh, thank you for the radical honesty and candor. No one had been like honest with me. I talked to my investors. I offered to return the money, and they said, no, let's find another idea. So now why don't you and I look on finding an idea together?" Huh. And I'm like, no, it's the last thing I want. I have time. And I kept saying no. And then he mailed me a check for $5,000. He's like, "I'm going to pay you $5,000 a month to work for you." And I'm like, "Hey, fine, keep your money. You're super motivated, clearly. Let's see if we can do this." And in a way, it was useful, because it forced me. The first thing I made him do is like help me filter my inbound deal flow. And at that time, it was 200 a week. It was like 40 a week. And I was like, can I teach someone else my heuristics? Can I codify how to evaluate a team, how to evaluate if a business is attractive, what my thesis is, what appropriate deal terms are, and can I have them do that for me and not pass to the next Uber? And turns out that, well, A, was useful because it forced me to structure my thinking on like what my heuristics were and teach them to him. And once he started seeing all the deal flow, he started getting ideas, started applying the same criteria to his own ideas. And then we started with 50 ideas, then, became 10, then 5, then 2, then 1, then we pivoted. And that company became Adore Me. And Adore Me is a laundry D2C commerce subscription company, both e-commerce subscription and that, which today is like, I don't know, over 200 million revenues. I don't know, 20 million EBITDA. I mean, it might be much more than that, but like at least that, and crushing it. And the last thing he did, and I told him to, is like, find me your replacement. And so we started a program where we would go to the first year of business school at Harvard, MIT, Wharton, Columbia, and Stanford. We'd say, hey, you're going to join us full time during the summer between your first and second year. Half the summer, you're going to be taught venture capital, not because we want you to be VCs, but because we want you to see what the ideas are, how to pitch, how to write an effective deck, and keep your pulse on the fingers of the market, your fingers on the pulse of the market. And number two, half the summer you're going to be in the company we're currently trying to build, so you understand what it's like to be an early stage founder. The profile. So the reason we took these schools, by the way, even though on average we'd rather have people that don't go to business school, is that it's just an easy filtering mechanism. But we only wanted people who wanted to be founders, and most of them, the profile was they were product managers or city managers at one of the larger marketplaces like Instacart or Uber or Airbnb, and they wanted to now go and do it on their own. And they were in HBS like looking for ideas and just maybe improving their skills in like finance, something like that. So they joined us for the summer. During their second year, they're part-time, 15, 20 hours a week, mostly helping us filter inbound deal flow. And then when they graduate, they become full-time EIRs, meaning we pay them, I don't know what the salary was, like maybe $135K a year or something like that, to look for ideas with us. They look for their own ideas, and we meet like on a weekly basis to iterate. Now, also, twice a year, we bring the entire team, investment team, everyone like in the team together, once in February and once in August and July, usually at my house in Turks and Caicos, who are in Canada. And we have to all come up with ideas that don't exist in the world of tech that should. And out of these, and we usually come up with like 100 a pop or 150 a pop, so 200 to 300 ideas a year, of which they can actually go deeper and pick some of these, etc. And we typically would take 2 a year, but there'd be some churn because some people decided to build companies that were not, for us. Some people decided they don't want to be founders after all, etc. And we ended up building a lot of companies like that. I mean, we some successful, not so much. So we built a company called BP, which should have been Carvana, raised 150 million and was worth 700 million and like infamously blew up. The main mission is we try to have the founders fail fast. So we try to build a company. We built a company called Poncho, which is like an insurance company, and it didn't grow big enough, and so we decided to close it. But then we've had a lot of companies that are really doing well. So we're in Rebag, which is a handbag marketplace. I think they're going to do 200 million in revenues this year, or something like that. That the founder is amazing. We're in Properly, which is a Zillow, Trulia meets Compass meets Open Door for Canada, absolutely crushing it. Last round was like multi-$100 million valuation.
We're investors in that with you. Great company. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. I'm chairman of that one, and Unshul is one of the best EIRs we've ever had, but also one of the best founders we've ever had. The team is amazing. We're in Mundi, which is a trade finance company between Mexico and the U.S., helping SMBs in Mexico export to the U.S. And they grew from zero to like tens of millions in originations in like a year and a half, like mind-boggling. I don't know if it's tens of millions, definitely over 10 million, might be over 20 million now. We're in like Seafair, a marketplace for helping shipping companies find seafarers, kind of a work rise for shipping. We're in Umami Card, which is a vertical grocer in the Asian category. We've created Mealco, which is a kind of Shopify for restaurants, helping people build digital brands in food and helping restaurants operate better and more effectively. I mean, many of these, and actually I ran One of them actually 2014, 2015, I built a mobile classified site in the US called Sellid, which I then merged with Wallapop. I ran Wallapop US. I was chairman of Wallapop. And then we merged that with Letgo, which now, of course, is merged with OfferUp. So now it's OfferUp. And that's a multi-billion-dollar company, which I ran 2014, 2015. And the studio model is as follows. Very, very different, very generous, because we do very few. You come in, we pay you $135K until you find an idea. Once you find an idea, we put in the first $750K with 65% of the capital going to the team, 35% to us, and then we commit the next $2 million at either $10 million valuation or market if you can get better terms. But we have the right to invest $2 million in your next round. And so it's not at all like some of the other studios out there where the teams get 5, 10, 15%. Or in our case, they start with 65% and actually real capital, right? Like you kind of get 2.75 million. So if you don't want to go to market for the first 2 years, you don't really need to. And that model has really worked well in terms of like, it's fun. We've built amazing companies. The problem is it's time consuming and my time is not scalable. I'm on the board of like, in these companies, it's the opposite model. Like, we're coming up with the ideas. So, and often I even ran product like Rebag and Lofty. I was like, I went to Ukraine and Romania and I hired the team. I was like Scrum Master. I was actually writing the stories and managing the teams. I was working day and night for them for many years. And now I'm still on the board of like, most of the ones I just mentioned. And so that model, I mean, it's amazing, but it's just too time consuming. And so putting that on hold for now, but we still have like 2 or 3 more to build. We still have 2 more to build as we speak, despite the fact that we're not recruiting a new batch in 2022.
There's only so much, Fabrice. That's a lot of, sounds like you're spread pretty thin if you're doing all that.
Yeah. Plus we have a SPAC. Plus I do a lot of stuff in crypto independently of what we do at FJ. Yeah, no, I'm spread too thin as is. And so my current, what I'd like to find a way to do, the reason I built the team to 31 is actually to do a lot of the stuff I don't like to do, which right. The good news is that. The problem is when you're good at something, the universe sends you more of that. And so the temptation, of course, is to do more and more and more. But I need to find a way to like be more scalable. And I think putting aside started the studio despite how much fun it is and just focusing on the venture side because it's more scalable and probably more useful for humanity in the long run, but in terms of like placing bets in so many categories to try to address all the world's problems is probably a better allocation of time.
And I can tell you're inspired by it.
Yeah.
You've had a lot of success. I think that's safe to say, maybe an understatement of the day. Did you grow up wealthy?
So yes and no, which is a weird answer. My great grandmother, great grandmother, in the late 1800s, inherited a hotel from when her husband passed away, and instead of doing the done thing, and marrying again, she decided to just take over the hotel, which was like fully indebted. She turned it around, made it super profitable, then bought another one, then another one. She ended up owning all of the luxury hotels in Nice, owning half of the residential real estate of Nice, basically becoming the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, one of the wealthiest women in the world in the late 1800s. She gave it all to, she had multiple children. She gave it all to her oldest, Augustus, who was actually an effective manager and didn't lose any of it. But of course, but he didn't do the same thing. And by the time his kids took over, it was split between all of them, and they all spent basically the nouveau riche. All they wanted to do is like hang out with like the Queen of England and the Prince of Monaco. And by the time of my grandparents' generation, by the time my parents came along, there was basically nothing left. And so imagine a generation that had been brought up with the idea that they were going to be wealthy and never need to work, it's kind of the silver spoon in their mouth, and yet didn't have anything or anything to show for it. And so my father kind of started from scratch. So when we were living, the four of us, my brother and I have 2 brothers, but like when we started, my brother and my parents like in a studio apartment, and he started working for this French billionaire as an analyst, and they're a leveraged buyout firm in the 70s. And so we came from, even though we had come from family that had a lot of money, by the time my parents' level, there was nothing left. And so we started with nothing. I went to public school. But in 1989, when I was 14, my father was rose through the ranks, became the CEO of the company that guy bought through an LBO, and they sold it for whatever, like $1 billion. And I think my dad had like 5% of it in stock options. It's kind of like the not venture capital per se, but like a similar model, and overnight became wealthy, and actually kind of retired at the age of 41, which I think was a huge mistake. But I guess I didn't live through it, because at that point I was living with my grandmother and niece, and then I'd left for college, and probably out of ego, I decided I didn't want to ask for any help. So I, paid for college mostly myself. I mean, for my living expenses myself. So I had to work I went to Princeton when I was 17, but I'd like to work 4 jobs plus build my first company to pay for it, etc. And whereas probably the easier thing would have been to ask my parents for money. So, because at that point in time, we did have money, because that was 2 years after my father had become wealthy. But because I had left kind of my parents, I was living with my grandmother, I also didn't really notice a shift. And so I came from an upper class family that was probably middle class in income, but that rose through the ranks, and then all of a sudden became wealthy at the age of 15. Well, age 15 for me, but my parents became wealthy.
But from a life experience standpoint, it sounds like you had more modest sensibilities as a kid than maybe generations before you. How has money changed your life now? Because you've had tremendous success. I know that is challenging for a lot of entrepreneurs who are going through these cycles. What have been the ups and downs of this evolution for you?
I don't know. Like, first of all, as a kid, I was just built differently from everyone else in my family. I was like really studious. Like until post-college, I was like Sheldon. For me, it was all about like intellectual pursuits and getting A pluses and skipping all the grades and winning the Olympiads. And I was completely antisocial, not at all a good public speaker or frankly, just different. Like I cared about like studying economics and philosophy and getting A pluses and nothing else, and math. Like I no interest outside of that,
right.
and no time for anyone, including, by the way, my family. I was extremely arrogant and condescending as a kid, of like, you guys are not smart enough and worthy enough of my time and attention, including my parents, by the way. I was like, so it's funny because in a way I was the best kid ever, like always A pluses, going to bed early, not doing anything bad, etc. But I was also a difficult kid in the sense that I like didn't provide much love. It was like, yeah, you guys are not smart enough for me. Leave me be. I have learned, and it's interesting because like I've come to value people in different. I think as like you put emphasis and value in things you're really good at, and of course that I was really good at being smart and not so good at anything else. And so of course that was my prism by which to value the world. And as you become older and also more confident and successful, you also realize there's so many ways to be and to live, and it's not my way as a personal value judgment, but there are many other ways that are absolutely amazing. Now, to answer your question directly, it's a little bit of a non sequitur.
No, it's
so I became wealthy in 2004. I sold Zingy for $80 million. And I own 53% of the company. So I made like $43 million. Net of tax, it was like 26.5. And what's interesting is like, in a way, it didn't change anything. I still lived in a studio apartment for a few more years. I think the big purchase at that time was an Xbox, a TV, and 2 tennis rackets. Mostly driven by how busy I was, right? Like we grew from 50 million in revenues in 04 to 200 in 2005. I kept moving offices every 4 months and thinking we would be done. And like we kept needing bigger and bigger offices and hiring, and like so I didn't really hit me completely. Well, what's interesting is my first company where I built in 98, 99, like my company on paper was worth hundreds of millions, and that had come so easily that I didn't realize how much money that was. Like at 20, I started by that company at 23, is like an eBay of Europe. We had a buyout offer for like 300 million at 40% of the company. I was going to make like $120 million. And again, like I'm like, man, of course, everyone makes $120 million. It's just a bubble. Like everything seemed easy.
Right.
I did not realize how because you're 23, you don't know any better. And also, I never really lacked for money. And also, money was never an objective. It's like it's not even a means to an end. I want to be a tech founder. That's all I wanted to be. And,
Right.
and whether or not I was going to be financially successful was kind of irrelevant, which is why, by the way, in 2000, and so after the bubble burst, and I went from hero to zero basically, and like was bankrupt in 2001. Then I realized maybe I should have taken a secondary for a couple of million, which people offered, and I'd
Mm-hmm.
be like, nah, a couple million, who need? I want to be the founder that's all in. I don't want to take money off the table, et cetera. I want to be the ideal entrepreneur. And of course, for me, I thought like a couple million is nothing. Of course, at that point, I was thinking that having literally nothing in my bank account.
Right.
Then I realized, oh shit, no, money is really hard to make. It's very easy to lose. It's very, very hard to make. But in 2001, when I went to build Zingy, I'm like, this internet thing is dead. It's small. It's not big, and no big deal. At the end of the day, I didn't do this for the money. I did this I wanted to create something and nothing. I love tech, so I'm going to build a new company. It's probably not going to be big, and it doesn't matter. Now, lo and behold, it turns out that the internet wasn't dead, despite every company had gone on. Webvan, Pets.com, MCI WorkCom, everyone got under and at that point in time, and VC stopped investing, but came back and was financially successful. Now, what it's done for me since is I value experiences and I value my time, and so what I use the money for is I have a butler or an estate manager and who's also my chef and like does all of the offline things that I don't like to do. So I don't cook, I don't clean, etc. I have a virtual assistant in the Philippines that manages my entire life. I go heli skiing, which is extraordinarily expensive, by the way, for fun. Now I don't own any physical goods per se. I mean, I have a house in Turks. I have a house, and I have an apartment in New York. And I have a house in Revelstoke, but I don't have, I really have like expensive cars or clothing or luxury, etc. All those things I don't think matter too much to me. I think physical goods are anchors, but for me, it's more using the financial success I've had as a means of buying experiences I love, helping people around me, and I give millions a year. But beyond giving millions a year to charity, I actually give millions a year to my friends as a means of changing their lives and making a difference on the day-to-day of their life. And it's a bit non-traditional in a way, but these are people I've known for 20, 30 years, and so I tell them, don't expect it to be recurring. It just happens when I have an exit or I feel you're in need, and it's meaningful for them, and I don't think it impacts our relationship. So I think it's been an amazing tool, and it's also been an amazing tool for freedom. Like my dream, for instance, in FJ Labs is actually not to have external investors. If I could, if the maximum I can invest with my current strategy is 300 million a year, if I had 300 million a year of my own money to deploy, I would do that and not have any external capital. That would be way easier. Like that would remove the part of my life that I don't like, of like dealing with LPs and fundraising and like K1s and like whatever gap accounting and SEC registration and all that stuff. I would do that in a heartbeat. So, financial success is really a means of personal freedom to do what you want when you want, to have the experiences you want to have, and to help the people around you.
Was there a moment when you felt like you got your sea legs with being wealthy, where it went from, kind of figuring out what that meant for you to, okay, I got it. I know my framework for how I want to use money to have impact on my friends, my personal life, etc.
Kind of happened over time, automatically. Like as soon as I had capital, I started investing in startups. So I really scaled up my angel investing in 2005, and I knew I wanted to deploy capital in tech to back my friends who were building companies and to help them realize their dreams and to solve the problems in the world. So that immediately came to me. In terms of like helping my friends, did that later, but I realized what I started considering like little capital could change, and it could make a difference in the lives of my friends. So a friend of mine, she was running a dermatology clinic in New York, and she was making whatever $500,000, $1 million a year, and she decided instead to go run a cancer research lab at Harvard and make like whatever 100K a year. I mean, profound difference in her income. Yet for the world, I thought it was like a massive net positive contribution. But as a result, she could no longer afford like the down payment of her house in Boston. So I paid that for her. I'm like, I think it's the right thing for you and your husband and your kids to be able to live in an amazing place so you can actually do research that's meaningful to the world. And that started happening little by little over time. No, I'm not sure there was ever like this is the correct strategy. I mean, very rapidly, what I did realize is I never followed traditional wealth management advice. You go to these wealth managers like Goldman or whatever, and they're like, oh, you should have like 60% equities and 30% bonds and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
like
crazy.
None of that ever made any sense to me. I have a complete barbell portfolio where it's like 10% cash because you want optionality of being able to take advantage of things in crises, 10% crypto, 10% public stocks of the things that have gone public in my portfolio that I still like and I hold, 10% real estate that's really consumption, and then everything else is like early stage tech stuff. So completely barbell, works really well. And I realized I was much better at doing that, which is essentially the same thing as like running FJ Labs. FJ Labs in a way is a family office.
Right.
And so I've been good on that front. Now I made many mistakes. Like I lost in a way millions of dollars in Belize trying to like buy a big chunk of the country to preserve the rainforest, which taught me something about rule of law. I lost millions of dollars in Dominican Republic doing something at a much smaller scale. Instead of hundreds of thousands of acres, doing it with 165 acres, wanting to build a big community where I would bring founders and spiritual leaders and artists to like just create and be there with no business model, but like everyone from the mayor to the minister of tourism and environment all wanted bribes, and create an environment that was not super tenable. So lost millions of dollars, pursuing a few these alleys. So I made many mistakes along the way, but in general, at the end of the day, my true North Star of like, help those around you, help the world through, in my case, tech investments, so like finding solutions to world problems, and like buy yourself the life you want to lead has been amazing. By the way, through that process, I did a lot of iteration. In 2013, actually 2012, I gave almost all my physical possessions to charity. I went down to like 50 items that fit in carry-on, my backpack and my tennis bag, and I went couch surfing in friends' couches for a year. Then I went like an Airbnb. I lived in Airbnbs and hotels for like 3 years. Beyond that, all around the world, like making sure I allocate time to invest in my friends and friendship, in my friendships and my family in a way I'd never done that before, and I loved it.
And why did you need to do that? Just because the material items were kind of owning you at some level? Was that the thinking? Why'd you have to dump all the goods to do that, to have relationships?
Time allocation, right? Like if you have, like, I had a country house in Bedford, and I would go, and it was amazing, right? Like it was huge, and we'd play paintball there, and like it organized like parties, and we played video games, we had the gaming room, etc. But at the end of the day, I kind of went there because I was paying so much for it, which is the wrong reason to use something. The minute I didn't have an apartment, the minute I didn't have a house, I was like, okay, now I have infinite freedom and flexibility. Where do I want to be? Who is it that I want to be spending time with? And so when you have a default, you go to that default. If you remove the default option, you can be way more thoughtful about what it is you really want to do, who it is you really want to hang out with. And the fundamental problem I was trying to solve for is, as you get older, as your friends start getting married, having kids, jobs, etc., like the quality of the texture of your friendships like changes. When you're in college, you're remaking the world. You're seeing your friends 7 days a week. Even at McKinsey, I would see my friends many days, many hours every week, and all of a sudden it became like the biographical update. I would see you once every 6 weeks. And at that point is like, what happened to your husband and your work, et cetera, and your kids since then? And it's fine, but it's not the reason we became friends. We became friends because there was a more fundamental connection and perspective and belief system of the world and extraordinary conversations. And I wanted to rekindle that in my 30s, because it seemed to have gone away between like the age of like 25 and whatever 35. And I'm like, there must be a way to change it. And others are not making the adjustments to their lives why don't I adjust my life to make it happen? And now there were many false starts, right? Like the couch surfing was a total failure because, of course, I wasn't taking into account the fact that I was in a position in their life, and they still had like to bring kids to school and go to work, etc. The Airbnb thing worked really well until Airbnb was made illegal in most of the major cities, and like across New York, all the high-end inventory disappeared. Then the hotels all became full, so I was like moving hotels every 4 days. So that's actually the reason I ended up buying an apartment in New York. I was very happy living in like billionaires' apartments, for a month at a time in every neighborhood in New York and hosting dinner parties there. But once I had to live in hotels and move hotel room every 5 days, I'm like, okay, that's not viable. And I couldn't find high-end rental inventory I liked, so I bought a place. But I guess people don't put enough iteration and thought into their lives. They follow the default, whereas you can throw stuff on the wall and see what sticks for you, right? Like people are built differently and what they want to do and how they want to lead their lives, and they follow the default path way too much. Like my life is very non-traditional in general. Like I do a month in New York, then a month in Turks and Caicos. I'll do a month in Canada because like I'm in New York and it's socially, artistically, professionally extraordinarily intense. And if you're not thinking. And then I come to Turks and I'm working during the day. I mean, I'm in Turks right now and we're doing this call and I have like 12 calls today. But I'll meditate, I'll go kite surf, I'll play tennis, and I'll take the time to read and write and think and be reflective and rebuild my batteries. And then most people don't necessarily think through, okay, what is right for them in light of their energy level, personality, etc. And so that iterative design has allowed me to the life I lead today.
I love all that. And you mentioned through there that you do a lot of charity, which I think is great. I particularly was interested in the buying a rainforest or attempts to do so. Taking it that further, I would love to hear your take on impact, right? Is there a cause that you're passionate about or some particular topic? Let me put it a different way. This is my favorite way to ask this question. If you were king, not president, king, what is one thing you would change?
So I'm going to give the hyper-rational answer to that.
Please. If
you look at all the policies you could do in the US and which ones would actually impact well-being for people the most, it's actually, there's one thing that has much larger impact on personal outcome than everything else. And so in the US, social mobility has declined. It used to be that 95% of people made more money than their parents. Now it's about 50% since people born since 1982. And the main reason for that is that the top cities are the ones where all the jobs are created, where all the opportunities are, have become unaffordable. And the reason they're unaffordable is we've passed extraordinarily idiotic zoning and landscaping laws and that mean that you cannot build as easily as you should be able to. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Like if your current owner restricting supply means your home's increase in value dramatically. But it's extremely bad for like social mobility, economic diversity. And so you look at San Francisco, 80% of the city is zones that apartments are illegal. You cannot have more than 2-story buildings. And as a result, you've had these cities become extraordinarily unaffordable. So if I could change one thing, is essentially remove all air rights, all essentially zoning and construction regulation, other than obviously if you're not going to be building over whatever Central Park. But like air rights in New York City make no sense. Like having these buildings that are less than 100 years old be like landmark that you can't build over them makes no sense. You should be able to build up as much as you can, and we should have unlimited supply. And of course, there'll be a lag of like 8 years or 10 years before things get built and prices adjust. But that actually solves affordable housing. And when you solve affordable housing, you recreate mobility and you allow people to get the best jobs. And this is what changes the outcome more than anything else. Now, that's not a something I'm investing in any way, shape, or form, because there's crazy NIMBYism and political forces against it. And it has to be. And in the U.S., the rules are like literally like neighborhood by neighborhood, and it's so painful. So as king, I would do that. That is not what I allocate my time to. Now, I've not put a lot of thought into charity. Now, first of all, what I do at the charity level is is way more personal and directed, will have a much larger impact on the lives of the people I help, but it's much smaller scale. Like in the Dominican Republic, I helped pay for the education of 10,000 kids from K through 12. It's amazing for these kids. It changes their life outcomes dramatically.
Is there a program you do that through, or you just set that up directly?
No, it's the Dream Project that I was funding, I helped them beyond that. I built like a tech center where they could like learn programming and have access to computers and the internet and find jobs, etc. I fund something called the University of the People, which is helping low-income people basically get U.S. degrees, especially in things like computer science. And they're people from like over 100 nations, and they often end up getting jobs at like Google, Facebook, etc. So it's been mostly around education, helping people be able to increase their life outcomes through education. Often in the communities where I was living, right? I lived in the DR for a large extent, like 4 or 5 months a year, from 2012 to 2018. I've done a lot of that. Now, separately, I've given direct contributions to many of my friends, and I mean like dozens of them, right? Like, and we're talking millions and millions of dollars. It's life-changing for them. But at a larger scale, all of that is dwarfed from a social and economic impact by what I do as a tech investor, right? Like my tech investments of hundreds and hundreds of companies, I think ultimately will change the lives of billions of people. And yeah, they're for profit, but like there's a fundamental social motivation for them. And I think they will dwarf anything I do on the direct investment and the direct charity front. That's why most of my personal capital is actually allocated to investing in technology to solve the world's problems. And I think we will, by the way. I'm extraordinarily optimistic on how we're going to address climate change, inequality of opportunity, et cetera.
It's been great having you on. Thank you so much for doing this, Fabrice.
Thank you for having me.
Every time I talk to Fabrice, I feel a little bit smarter. Very grateful for him being on the show today, and grateful to have him kind of in my orbit, working together and doing deals together. He's a great guy. If you liked what you heard, please hook us up with a like or a 5-star review. This is my basic pandering. Help us out. You can find me on Twitter at MPD, and to hear more of my conversations with innovators, subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, or any major podcast platform. Just search for Innovation with Mark Peter Davis.